It's not like saying like, we need to get up here because something's going wrong. We need to get up here, same urgency, because we don't want things to go wrong,
exactly.
Right? You got to educate and have that collaboration with the customer day one.
And it's the basis of not only integrated pest management, especially for indoors, that is hygiene. Really, you can prevent so much if you're keeping your plants clean, but it's integrated plant health management, which is a broader topic.
Thank you for joining us and welcome to the John Minnie podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture, indoors and out, through the perspectives of the many amazing people who have made it their career. I'm your host, Mark Minnie, president of John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes. Our team is purpose-driven to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. All right, now welcome back to our 4-part project spotlight on the Winter Garden palm trees. The Winter Garden is an iconic space in downtown New York City. It's part of Brookfield Place, and at the heart of this space stands 16 Washingtonia robusta palm trees. These trees are introduced to this atrium in space at around 35 feet tall, give or take, and they grow to upwards of 60 feet before needing to be replaced. That means they are replaced and replanted every 10 years or so, and the replanting of these trees entails a 3-year-long effort and culminates in a 2-week overnight planting. If you haven't already, go back and listen to parts 1 through 3 of this project spotlight. Part 1 explains why we have to replant these trees and gives a little history of the landscape. Part 2 highlights the 3-year-long process that I just mentioned, developing relationships and tree finding. Part 3 discusses that 2-week overnight installation, right? 2 weeks installing 16 37-foot tall palm trees. That's pretty wild. And today, part 4, I sit down with Andrew Engel, the chief horticulturalist at John Minnie, to talk about the maintenance and horticultural regimen that goes into keeping these trees healthy and thriving for their tenure in the Winter Garden. Before we dive in, allow me to give a big thank you to Brookfield and the CBRE team who we work for. Brookfield's commitment to one-of-a-kind spaces is truly inspirational. This space, with the palm trees at the center of it all, is a cultural destination in the heart of downtown New York City. Brookfield and the CBRE team on site, none of this is possible without your guidance, support, and collaboration to get this project right. Thank you. If you guys enjoy this conversation today, please kindly give us a like, a subscribe, or a review on whatever platform you consume your podcasts on. All right, enough of me. Without further ado, let's head over to my conversation with Andrew. All right, welcome back to our 4-part podcast series on the Winter Garden indoor landscape. Today, we're sitting down with Andrew Engel, the chief horticulturalist at John Minnie. In the past 3 parts of this mini series, we have focused on a little bit of the history and context on the Winter Garden landscape and its majestic Washingtonia palm trees. We talked about the recent replanting of them in July of 2024, what that process looked like. And we also discussed how we determine the longevity of these trees and how they need to be replanted every 10 years or so. So they get replanted, and then somebody's got to take care of them for 10 years, make sure they stay alive.
That's true.
There you go. And that is our job as well, the John Minnie team. And Andrew, as the chief horticulturist in other roles with John Minnie, has been involved with the maintenance for several years. I'll let him speak to that. But that's what this part of the podcast series is all about. We're going to peel back the curtains on what the maintenance looks like, some of the challenges, the fun and excitement that come with it. It is an important and high-stakes process. We cannot forget horticultural maintenance on any of the landscapes we work on. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, how long have you been involved?
I've been working out in the Winter Garden since I started here, Mark. Going on 12, 13, I don't know how many years it's been, but different capacities. Started off as a horticulturist. I was working under Derek and some of our experienced horticulturists that have been taking care of it for a while. So I helped lay out the plastic that we lay out before we wash them down, doing some of the grunt work. And then I was a supervisor, but not for this territory. And but I was the account manager there, so I was responsible then, and then in my other various capacities. So I've been working with them for a little bit over a decade, and this is the really the third set that I've
Had a
seen.
part of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was my first year that last set was there. Then I was here for the entire span of the set we just removed, and of course now the new set's in. So
yeah,
another decade.
So an awesome perspective, and also being in the account manager, regional account manager role, and now obviously the chief horticulturalist, kind of have horticultural responsibilities as well as like client responsibilities, which are both need to go hand in hand, especially with a project like this. And many horticulturalists involved on the last set as well as the current one. But now you're in a role where you're kind of like the lead horticulturalist.
I've always felt the pressure's always been on. I always felt like I was responsible somehow, some way, shape, or form. But I guess now probably I am even more so.
Oh, yeah.
But no, that's all right. They're awesome. They never let me down.
There you go. You don't let them down.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So why don't we dive in? As simple as you want to. I think the best way to do it is just kind of generally walk through what the horticultural maintenance regimen looks like, maybe the schedule, and I'll just like jump in and ask you to peel back.
Sure.
The curtain a little deeper.
That sounds good. I mean, there's visits, like scheduled visits where we do a good amount of work, and then there's just regular check-ins and inspections. We visit the palms at least weekly in one way, shape, or form from a management perspective. Usually Stephanie, who is the account manager there, she's very, very diligent. She'll go through weekly, or her supervisor, Stephen, or, they might do it with one of their horticulturists, but they go by just to do an inspection. They also probe the soil every week. These trees drink a lot, and we just want to make sure that everything is looking good. We've had instances in the past where there's been irrigation leaks, or, in other scenarios, people have tampered with, components. So we really want to just be beyond diligent in a way. And so we go and we probe each pit, and then we make adjustments on that irrigation should we need them. And interestingly, we do find variances between the palms and how much they need.
So just to bring it back, and I think we actually talked about this maybe in the install episode, the last one. 16 of these trees, we've gone through that, and one tree per pit. We zone the irrigation and ring the irrigation lines around each tree, so
That's right.
Each pit, so we can kind of adjust the amount of water by tree.
Exactly. There's 16 zones and 16 trees,
Yep.
And then 2 trees to a vault. So the 2 tree pits are connected, which is actually really helpful for us from a maintenance standpoint, because there's been times where, if one zone is leaking, it has a lot of soil, and the other tree can actually pull some of that moisture over to, the second pit. Or if one zone isn't working that well, it can pull from the other pit that's attached to the vault. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
It gives you a little
the fact that they're not isolated in their single
Yeah.
pits gives you a little bit more flexibility, or I guess like backup for what if scenarios,
exactly.
like, because that's the real world, right? Like
Yep.
sometimes a line might get clogged, or you'll have to assess what's going on and make adjustments. Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Sorry.
No, that's good.
So that's the weekly visits. So,
Yep.
So when you go on those weekly visits, I know you guys are probing. Why don't you walk through, like, visually, like, what are you doing? Like, if it was you, I know Stephanie or Steven's probably doing it most of the time on these weekly visits. I have a methodology, like when I show up on site, like how I like to walk through the site initially. Is there like a process on those weekly site visits? Because obviously you're pulling out the grates and probing,
right,
but also just visual inspection at this point.
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, you really want to walk around the whole atrium. So there's 2 levels. There's an upstairs where you're a little bit closer to the canopies, and then there's the below the trees. Honestly, you're really just inspecting them for one, you're looking for signs of anything abnormal, like premature yellowing or any changes that have occurred since your last visit, because there really shouldn't be that much of a difference from week to week. And you're looking for any sort of insect. Really, the biggest issue over there traditionally has been spider mites. We've been pretty lucky to not have them for a long time. But there's fine webbing that you can see. So it's just something that you keep your eye out for. I know when I walk through with Stephanie, we're often looking for things that we can relay to the team that's actually going to go up into the canopies, which we do once a month, and we'll talk about that. But we're kind of looking for stuff that we can relay and say, hey, keep an eye out for this, keep an eye out for that, or remove this, remove that. So a lot of it's really an aesthetic view. You do see a lot more when you actually get up there. They are quite a distance away from you. But I would say that's pretty much what the inspection is. It's just going over each tree.
Yep.
And taking pictures from multiple perspectives that we can kind of share internally with each other.
Yeah, documentation is always key.
Oh yeah,
throughout.
yeah.
So monthly visits, then, right, where you get to actually go up in, it's not a little canopy. You get to get up and play in the canopy of these 35-foot or taller as they grow over the years.
It can get a little scary up there.
Yeah, you got to be ready and comfortable to use that lift for sure.
Definitely, yeah. And don't forget they're very spiky. The fronds. So if you haven't been kind of cut by one, you're not really in the club. Not that you want to get cut by them, but it's just it'll happen one way or the other. But when you're using an atrium lift, which is essentially a much larger lift than we're generally used to, we tend to use scissor lifts a lot more, and they're just more mobile and flexible. But you got to get up there really high, but you also need the capability to maneuver. You can't drive the lift everywhere in the atrium, so you have certain spots where you can set it up, and then you need the ability to maneuver in multiple different directions and kind of angle yourself appropriately. So we do. There's two different main tasks that we do when we go up there monthly. One of them is to spray the palms down. And generally we're just using kind of like a soapy mixture. And we do that just to clean, the dust, any insects, or, sometimes there's actually birds that get into there. I think that they, in the past, have released like predators to attack the birds, like hawks or something like that. I don't know if they still do. I actually haven't seen one in a while. But you're just generally cleaning them, so they can photosynthesize as much as possible and they look clean. And then
I think we stop and talk about hygiene there for all.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's like a really important part, right? And I feel like when we talk about lessons learned from a job like this that can be applied elsewhere, that's critical, right? I think any good indoor plant horticulturalist knows good plant hygiene is key. It's like one of the most effective things you can do to protect a plant.
100%.
And when you get into bigger landscapes, it becomes a challenge.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, access is something that they thought about when we, when this job was being, built. You can access each of these canopies when you need to, and that's critical. There are certainly jobs that we have had in the past and currently where access is a major issue. It's a major production. It's very costly. It doesn't make sense sometimes. Thinking about this job where there's a planter that's kind of hanging off the side over a pool, and literally it's probably like 36-inch pothos plants, but for us to be able to access it, you close off the pool, you have to lay down stuff over the pool. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money. I mean, Needless to say, I think they ended up replacing them with some nice faux pothos, but there is access here, which is critical. And there are times when we do access it when it's not part of our regularly scheduled monthly visits. because we want to remove a yellowing leaf, because we want to check on something, because we want to inspect something. So
I
that
think
is
education and creating a partnership with your client is
absolutely
a huge takeaway here. Like it's a partnership with the client. Like they know how important this landscape is, obviously near and dear to our hearts, but like there's a collaboration there to understand, we can't just not do the critical basic horticultural things that we need to do, such as hygiene. Thus, we need to have this rapport of like accessing this space at a certain amount of frequency. So you really got to educate like the customer on like why these tasks are so important, whatever it is, whichever task you're referring to, and establish that need and urgency day one of like, hey, we got to get in here and clean things. And back to like hygiene is a huge one because it's all preventative, right? Like
correct.
We're trying to minimize, not necessarily that there are pests we're washing off, maybe, but dust or debris from birds, things that are harbors or like increase the likelihood of bigger challenges and issues happening. Right?
Definitely.
So it's very preventative. It's not like saying like we need to get up here because something's going wrong. We need to get up here, same urgency, because we don't want things to go wrong.
Exactly.
Right? And you got to educate and have that collaboration with the customer day one.
And it's the basis of not only integrated pest management, especially for indoors, that is hygiene. Really, you can prevent so much if you're keeping your plants clean, but it's integrated plant health management, which is a broader topic. As you were mentioning, yes, if plants, every little bit counts. If you look at these plants that are dusty under a microscope, you'd be amazed to see how much you're actually blocking them from getting light. So there's so many reasons that you want to keep them clean.
And in urban environments too, right? In cities, you're going to have higher amounts of dust. And
definitely. Yeah, you have much more particulate matter in the cities, no question about it. Outdoors, they're getting the rain, they're getting nice wind, everything that they need, but inside, and then you're limited with light. Obviously, you're lacking predators, so keep them clean. You can probably prevent the majority of insect issues if you keep it clean. But I do understand that spraying every single leaf that you have on your portfolio every week might be a challenge. So do what you can.
So I cut you off there. So I just wanted to jump in on that, the preventative, the cleaning, washing, but there's other obviously activities we're doing on those multi-visits as well.
Right. Yeah. So one visit's really about washing, and that's kind of done every other month. It is a big process. You're laying down a ton of plastic over the marble floor. You have to bring a dram sprayer up into the lift with you. So it's a bit messy. It requires a good amount of labor. And you do a light pruning usually then as well. And the other visit, which occurs on the alternate month, would be more or less a pruning visit. And these things grow pretty fast. They're very robust, as their name implies. So you're doing quite a bit of pruning. And of course, when these giant leaves come smashing down, there's a lot of it actually is a lot of labor to cut them all up and then track them all the way down into the basement, into the loading dock where they get put in a all get recycled down or whatever. So it is very laborious.
The pruning's exciting. We've done the counts in the past. I mean, we don't even need to go to the numbers, but like they are fast growing. They push out a lot of fronds, especially as they get settled in. And like how many fronds you're cutting off in a pruning session is just like astounding. So it is a lot of labor because like you're dropping these fronds and you got to cut them up and transport them. It's not like, we're like pruning like one frond here, one frond there. Like they're healthy and they keep growing. So you're doing like real volume of pruning every
and if we
month
for some reason can't get up to do a big pruning, like there's some months when we can get up there, but we can't get up to do our full pruning, and in those cases, if you wait too long, I mean the trees just get giant. There's so many fronds. It's actually awesome, but definitely, And
now you're up in the canopy, like you're doing general tasks, right? Hygiene, pest. I guess I won't jump the gun. Like pruning. What else are you doing while you have this opportunity?
I mean, I think it's general inspection up there. You're checking all some of the petioles and anything that could potentially fall or break off in a safety from a safety standpoint. Usually everything's pretty secure on the trees, but occasionally there are like loose bits and pieces here and there. We have had fronds that have prematurely kind of started to fail. I think only once that I can recall, and that I know part of a frond kind of fell prematurely, but it's very, very, very rare, and they're usually very, very immature. So that's not like something that's very hazardous. Um, so you're doing stuff from a safety standpoint when you're up there, and you're just doing an overall inspection. You get pretty close and up in the trees. Um, of course, looking for bugs if you had to do insect treatment. That's its own whole topic. It's really a case by case basis over there. It's a very public atrium, so what we do is we have to be pretty cautious about how we do and what we do. But I mean that's pretty much it. You're just doing a full health inspection. We have some very experienced people that go up there, people that know, what they're looking for, what they're doing, and
That's interesting when I think that's a really good point. So obviously you're up in the canopy now you're there weekly, or somebody's there weekly, maybe spotting some possible issues or concerns, potentially pests. Hopefully you can see pests earlier than that, because if you probably see them from that far away, it could be a bigger issue you have to deal with. But you're up in the canopy, you can spot pests at this moment if you're starting to see some activity, right?
That's right.
And it's huge because we do a lot of pruning, we do a lot of preventative maintenance for health of the trees. You don't want to just, for many reasons, you don't want to just be, throwing pesticides or applicating pesticides or any other methods without one needing to, right? I assume.
That's right.
And two, what are you applying or treating, right? It's like, well, part of it is identifying, is there any issues? And if so, there's an issue, let's just do general treatments, A, B, and C. No, let's be very thoughtful. What are we treating for? What is it? What's going to be the most effective? What's the, I don't know if I'm off base here at all.
No. I mean, you're on base. It's a little more complex than that, only in the sense that, some pesticides are certainly safer than others. Some application methods are safer than others. And there are things that you can do before there's an issue. On occasion, we put Californicus mites, which are predator mites, in the trees. They can last about a month without food or just eating pollen or other things that are up there. So they're a really good preventative mite, and they'll stick around for a while. Of course, if you have an issue up there, they're not going to necessarily do it for you. But yeah, the other factor is that yes, we have access, but we're not going to be able to get up there really every single day, or it would be a major inconvenience to do that. And with spider mites, they procreate and reproduce so fast that if you are treating for them, whatever you do has to be, or should be very effective, so that you're kind of treating as little times as necessary.
Sure. And when are we doing this work?
When? Oh, yeah.
I think it's important.
Sure, yeah. No, it's done. Like the trees, when they were installed, we're doing all this kind of we are doing it overnight.
Yeah, off hours. Yeah.
Off hours, yeah. Yeah, the weekly inspections and all that takes place during the day. But there's a lot of retail stores around here, and it's a very, very popular space. So in the summer and in the winter, really at any time of the year, and especially during the holidays too. So yeah, we work overnights. We cordon off the whole area. On occasion, every other month, we put down all that plastic. So yeah, it's can be up to 8 hours overnight shift for the team. Yeah. So it's a lot. It's definitely a lot, and this is not always a team that works overnight. So it can be a little disruptive to people's regularly.
Oh, definitely. No, shifting at night work is a challenge for anyone.
Absolutely.
And honorable. And it's an important point to make, and just for any of those, counterparts in the industry listening, like horticulturalists out there, contracting work, is you just want to establish that early on, right? Talk to it's basics, right? Make it a partnership with your customer. Like, be very clear about what you need to ensure success and longevity and health of the landscape, and then collaborate. Like, this is a massive project. Like, I think I heard a stat was like 1,000,000 people like foot traffic per day through this space or something like that.
It.
Like, it's major, retail, hospitality, office, like major hub for transportation. Like, it's just jamming. So, and the trees are huge. Like, you can't. It's safety. Like, it's just safer to do with less traffic. It's easier to control the environment. That's not to say there aren't projects with large trees where the customer can probably allow access during the day.
Yep.
But you just want to establish that early on with your customer, one, so you can plan for it. Like, it's hours, pricing from a contractor standpoint. So you're like, approaching the project the right way, and the expectations are clear, so you're not having any conflict with your customer down the road.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, it's just really interesting to talk about like the access and the timing.
They also provide an engineer with us each time.
Yep.
And some other security personnel that just kind of help keep people out of the way.
Yep.
You can get, if we do it on a Friday, for instance, there can be some pretty rowdy people that come through. They want to take away a palm frond with them and show it off or whatever. So yeah, it can be an interesting place.
Sure.
You brought up I just wanted to go back to like a point to emphasize it from a learning standpoint. Like, when we're doing this more intensive work on a monthly basis, but we're intimately assessing weekly. And you said like I wrote it down. Like, one of the ways you said is like, you're looking for obviously signs of abnormalities, which is based on what you said, changes since last visit. That's a really important thing to figure out and know as a horticulturalist, right? In an indoor landscape, for example, you may be seeing the landscape weekly, bi-weekly, once a month, maybe at most, but you need to dial in and understand what changes are normal during whatever that time frame is, so that you can assess and get ahead of issues like, all right, abnormal yellowing. It's like, well, what is abnormal yellowing? Yellowing depends on how often you're visually inspecting a landscape, right? And thus allows you to get ahead of any future issues, like saying like, oh, that's normal versus abnormal, so maybe I need to start sleuthing for other challenges that I might not be thinking of, so I can identify and attack them earlier. So I just wanted to go back to that. I thought that was a really good point.
I mean, detective work.
That's the starting foundation of it, right? Like, how do you identify what's abnormal, right?
Definitely. Yeah. You're looking for environmental changes. You're obviously looking for pests. The good news is that with most pests and pathogens, a plant's decline is a little bit slower than it would be with some kind of environmental shock. So if there was, let's just say they opened all the doors and they were exposed to freezing temperatures, you would see pretty quickly some major changes, and you'd have to stop and say, whoa, all right, let me investigate what happened, talk to the client. But some yellowing is to be expected. And then if you get your rhythm and palm fronds last much longer than other plants' leaves, you just get the routine of how often they should be yellowing or what that looks like, abnormal yellowing or not. And then, you just go back and investigate. Take all the notes, put all your findings together, sit down with the team, discuss it. That's my favorite part, no question.
Detective work.
Detective work, yeah.
That's a really good point too. Environmental challenges versus pathogens or disease or pests. Like the how quick things go wrong in either situation is also a good base thing to know. So how quickly you need to do. Well, how quickly it prompts that detective work, and how quickly you need to move. Depends, right?
I mean, and in that, you have nutritional disorders too, which we didn't really talk about, but there's quite a number of tests that you can perform here.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
And I can't remember what we had on the books, but right now it's the soil is really nice and soft, so you can still do testing pretty easily. Later on, about half their lifespan, the soil gets a little bit more compacted. It hasn't seemed to affect the palms much at all, but it's a little harder to get some accurate samples. But we try to do a soil test about every year, sometimes every other year. Right now, we're going to do one coming up, and we're going to test about half the trees. Just do it in a random dispersion and just see if we get any odd results. And you also want to do some sort of premature protection for like in the overall plant health program. So we were talking before about IPM and then integrated plant health management, IPHM. And in that program, there's a lot that you can do as far as adding different sorts of like microbials into the soil, stuff like Bioworks makes this product called Root Shield. It's a type of fungus, I believe, that helps with soil-borne diseases. It kind of outcompetes the pathogens in the soil. I don't really think that we have that to worry about per se, but it certainly doesn't do any harm to use it. And you just kind of never know. And there's other products that are kind of like, I don't know, amendments like amino acid mixes and humic acid, just building blocks for what makes plants healthy. So they don't need too much of all this stuff. You're not trying to make them necessarily grow faster than they are growing, but you do want to make sure that they are healthy. And
so I guess what's the goal, right? So like that underground assessment of like, the nutrients and what the planting medium looks like.
Yeah.
What's the goal? Like why, what, and the nutrients and treatments we're adding, like what's the goal?
I mean, I think the goal is to, we know what nutrients the plants need, but if there is a deficiency or a toxicity there, then the plants will show that. So we're trying to get ahead of that before it's a problem.
Cool.
I think these palms are so resilient that it's not really going to be something that we wouldn't be able to fix. But again, these fronds last for so long. It's not like a pothos leaf that has a much smaller lifespan or is producing new leaves much faster. It's these leaves last a long time. So if you have some nutrient deficient leaves with spotting or something strange on them, then you're going to be stuck with them for a while, one way or the other, even if you've kind of adjusted it. So that's why we're doing the testing. Cool. Just to rule anything out.
Get ahead of issues is an interesting point. Like I assume just like, fortifying root systems and like giving them the most preventative, or not necessarily preventative because they're just assessing at this point, but like to potentially treat.
They're getting a checkup. They're getting their booster shots or whatever they need. Keep them safe. They don't necessarily get put on some sort of like workout regimen or but they you got to keep them.
No, and in this case, like we're doing it probably more like you said, like we're overly cautious. It's like high stakes landscape. But I feel like that's a really good practice for any large indoor landscape, which, there's, I think there are a lot of more variables when you're dealing with like a higher variety of plantings or types of plants and stuff like that. Definitely. So it's just a good practice to highlight for sure.
Yeah, the stakes are much larger, obviously, than a potted 10-inch plant or 6-inch plant or whatnot. But it's also a great opportunity to practice horticulture on a different level, these type of projects, and to do that with your team so that they get more involved and can understand. Because there's going to be times, even with the 10-inch potted plant, that you may want to execute some of these, or that the lessons learned that are things that you do regularly for large trees, you might have to apply. So it's great to be able to practice with them.
Awesome. Now I'm going like back and forth because I feel like we went deep on like more the science of horticulture there versus I think a more common practice in our field, what as an urban, horticulturalist or urban landscaper, is one of the major tasks going back a few minutes ago was pruning. Now, we're pruning in this case, which I think is a case you're dealing with a lot in urban landscapes, is we're balancing aesthetics and client expectations with horticulture and needs of the landscape, right? And it was interesting because we were just talking about this when you and I and Stephanie were walking the site this morning, and you were explaining that we're cutting off fronds and we're pruning fronds in visits to keep the heads uniform.
Yeah.
Overly cautious on safety, but probably a little bit earlier than we may if we were just outside in the wild, right? Because I think you were alluding to like the older fronds are actually hanging on and feeding nutrients.
That's right.
Back to the tree, which is just interesting. But it's like you're balancing that in our trade all the time. Like, what's the best thing for the plant with what is the public, the people using and experiencing the space and the client needs, and you're trying to get the win-wins right all the time. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think aesthetics win a little bit in this case. Palms particularly.
Yeah, but you have to balance that without like,
well, I know,
going too far.
Yeah,
where like, well, now the tree's going to start.
I mean, it speaks to the resilience of these trees, and perhaps another reason you want to keep monitoring the nutrients because there are palms that will develop deficiencies in certain nutrients that they are pulling from the older fronds. As a general rule, you don't want to cut off any fronds that still have any sort of green on them. So we do that. And so aesthetics do sort of win out, and it's just another variable in this intersection of plants and people that is interior scaping.
I love it, yeah.
Intersection
of plants and people, right. And like balance of aesthetics and user experience and like plant need, And
I think that's what makes this interior scaping particularly fascinating or thought.
Yeah, exciting and challenging too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know the thresholds of the palms, and you have to be able to do things maybe you wouldn't do outdoors because of the expectations. They really, most people. I'll say this: every time we're there doing work overnight, someone comes by and doesn't believe that they're real. You can pull the grate open, you can show them their roots, and they're still kind of confused. So that's what they aim to. They aim to look perfect, essentially beautiful.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yes,
so that's why we know we're doing a great job.
Yes, it in a weird way, that is a good. I've thought that as well.
That's awesome. One of the things, it might not be like the most interesting, but I like talking about equipment. Like what kind of equipment are we using?
No, that's a good point because there is a lot. And we have this atrium lift,
you mentioned that,
the Denka lift, use painter's plastic, all sorts of things to cordon it off. But
I mean, the atrium lift also just to highlight that because like these are going in at 35 feet. They're around there now, but we'll be maintaining it for the next 10 years. At some point, we need to be getting up in these canopies that are 50, 55 feet tall higher. So just highlight that atrium lift need. Yeah.
The loppers we use are pretty special. I cannot remember, but it took me a very long time, and they were expensive to find a new pair because they're extra long, and you just, in some occasions, you can't get as close as you would with any. So they're definitely not anything you would find at a Home Depot. Like the length, even with extendable loppers, like these are really extra long, like the longest ones you can get. And they have to be really sharp because and give you enough force because they're not easy to cut through. I mean, these not only do these palms hold their fronds normally, but they're not ready to give these ones up. That's for sure. Stuff that's just starting to yellow or just starting to droop. So
I love pruning equipment. What's important about the equipment we're using, the pruning equipment we're using?
It's just got to be it's got to be long, and it's got to be sharp, and it's got to have allow for easy cutting. So
it's a good balance, and they need to be clean.
They need to be clean, of course. Yeah,
but that's important, right? Like I think we all talk about that. It's like we're not like just any old loppers, like we walked out of like cutting the ficus tree across the street, and now we're just gonna like bring those loppers over and cut here. No, we're like I've seen Law like start and end a shift. He's like inspecting the blades, like so that they're clean and sharp, and there's no necks, and they don't need to be either sharpened or replaced.
He's always sharpening them,
because you don't want unsharp,
clean
blades. You don't want
exactly
and clean, right? Yeah, that's super important.
You cannot. They're not cheap, but they're very good, and I don't think you could skimp on these. You'd have a very hard time, and you'd have to get so much closer that you definitely risk some sort of injury with all the sharp kind of spines on the fronds.
Equipment could be expensive, but you got to weigh your cost benefit analysis, right? Like, all right, an expensive piece of equipment versus like increasing chances of bad cuts, increasing chances of disease spread or like pests or safety. Like, you got to weigh that in for sure.
100%.
Nah, I love talking about equipment like that.
Then there's all the PPE too, of course, that you have to wear. You got your harness on, a helmet attached to the lift, got your boots on. Everything that you would need on a good site.
Gotta look like a professional and play like a professional.
I mean, when these fronds come down, they sort of float, but they're floating pretty fast. But when I say they float, it's very easy for them to go outside the cordon area as well. They don't usually, but they're kind of like paper airplanes in a way. They just have that big surface area. So you're kind of also have a crew down there used to be my job too, and still is sometimes, to just make sure that it doesn't hit anybody.
All right. I mean, we've covered like a lot of the general areas of like the maintenance considerations. We didn't go so deep into. I feel like I don't know. Maybe we should go deeper because we're making it sound easy, but it's an incredible task. But I think a good way to like round this out is like thinking about horticultural care. Back to where we started. The first few parts of this podcast mini-series was about history of the project, focusing on finding trees and replanting. Well, which took us 3 years in this past replanting, but let's not lose sight of this horticultural care regimen we're doing an overview on goes on for 10 plus years.
Yep.
What does that look like, Andrew? Does that like change or ebb or flow over 10 years, or is it just about discipline? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's discipline. There are slight variances and changes. You're checking weekly for a 10-year period, so you're going to make adjustments, and there are certain palms will let their personalities or their characters out. So some will change their requirements, and you just want to be on top of that. You'll find some variance in their nutrition, in their soil, and obviously how much they're drinking. And they're going to change in their form as well. So some will start to sort of grow a little wonky and then self-correct. Sometimes we call those S curves. And some will kind of lean a little bit, but will kind of kink out from the top. So it's not necessarily like the whole palm is leaning. It's just starting to lean somewhere halfway up. And usually it'll self-correct as well and start just kind of growing up. Some of this you don't know exactly why some of this all happens. Some of it is likely genetic. There's other components. It's not all due to light. There's minor changes. And then, of course, as they age and get taller, one of the concerns is, besides them outgrowing the space aesthetically, but potentially if something were ever to happen, if the heads were too full or too weighty.
It's part of why we do it every 10 years, right? They outgrow the space aesthetically, they're saying, but also, again, like we know outdoors, these trees grow really tall. They're super flexible, and they are flexible. Like we can see that when we're taking them down, but they're just not earning or strengthening their flexibility as robustly as they would when they're exposed to the natural elements like wind, rain, or storms that, for lack of better words, I like to think about it like exercise, like exercising them and building their flexibility over time outdoors, exposed to that natural movements and elements. But they're still growing. So as they grow, they're not developing that flexibility as proportional.
Yeah, they're just not as strong inside, definitely. And so extra precautions.
But I love that, like, discipline is where it's at. We want to build landscapes to last indoors and out. And longevity needs to be thought of every aspect of the landscape because at some point, everything has a lifespan or needs to be addressed or needs to be remediated or renewed, each portion of an indoor and outdoor landscape. So you determine that day one, right, like we have in this landscape. but then the horticultural care and maintenance and regimen has to be on point and discipline to get to that that point,
Absolutely.
right, where you're doing renewal, right? So discipline, I love that we started there. You got to be preventative. You have to not have lapses in your focus on horticultural care and training and education internally to ensure you're just on your game.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have been done right at this particular project. It's a really good example of planning being done correctly. There's a recognition of the need for access of these palms. There's a recognition that there's going to be different requirements over their lifespan, and we have those mapped out. But yeah, I just appreciate all of the things that are actually thought out in this particular project. It was definitely executed with thinking about how, forethinking involved.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, that's it. Come visit.
Come visit. Yeah, I love that. Definitely visit the palm trees at the Winter Garden at Brookfield Place. They're a beautiful thing. The space is beautiful. It's iconic, and I mean, this is rounding out our mini series on the Winter Garden landscape. So I love that you're ending with that. Like, go see these trees. Go visit Brookfield Place. Enjoy it, and if you're there and you bump into a horticulturist, ask them some questions and talk about the history. All right, Andrew, I appreciate your time today, and that's all we got.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Much gratitude to Andrew for his time today, and thank you to all our listeners for taking the time to be here with us. Listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. If you guys have any questions, ideas for future episodes, or always my favorite, any constructive feedback, please email us at podcast@johnmini.com. And a big final thank you to all our clients at John Mini Distinctive Landscapes. You guys allow us to make our passion our profession. None of this is possible without your support and vision to bring nature to the places people live, work, and play. This episode's a wrap. I hope you guys all have a great day, and always, always, always be sure to find a moment in your day to cherish the nature around you.